You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Shoe In Show. I'm on my 7th cup of coffee. My heart is pounding. I'm sweating a little bit. I'm feeling good. Sabria, how many cups have you had today?
You know I had 0. You know I'm not a coffee drinker.
Oh my.
Sorry.
I don't know, Sabria. I don't know about you anymore. I'm concerned about your health as I sweat here for pounds. Folks, today it's going to be a great episode. We have Katie O'Hara, who's with Dynamic Foam. If you've been to our sustainability events the last couple of years, or been on our calls, or even watched our Kicks Over Coffee episode we did with Katie about customized sustainability, I think that's something to definitely go back to. But you've probably seen her at a few events, and this is her first time on Shoe In. So, Katie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Sabria, I'll drink your coffee for you. No
Me
problem.
Too. We'll bear the burden. We will bear the burden and the load of your lack of coffee drinking.
I appreciate you guys can have
that. Man. Fine. Katie, you guys are based in Colorado. Dynamic Foam is the company. You focus on foam. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the company for folks who may not have heard of you guys before.
Great. Yeah, we, like you said, we're based out of Colorado, Steamboat Springs. And we really focus on recycled EVAs and rubbers. We have a huge range of materials that we produce, mostly insoles and midsoles for. But we also do outsoles, and we have manufacturing over in South Korea as well as Vietnam. But we're lucky enough to be based over here in the mountains. So
awesome. And I know we'll get into the sustainability here in a second, because you guys are very focused on that and have a lot of brands that you support and work with and provide product to. But you were recently at the Material Show. Our friend Hisham runs a Material Show in Portland and Boston, where the industry gathers to look at new materials and talk to suppliers. Maybe you can just quickly give us an update about the recent shows. How was the traffic? How were the conversations? What are you hearing?
Yeah. So Andy, I know you and I have kind of talked about this. The shows have been really great. People are getting back into the groove of in-person shows and meetings. We were there last fall, this spring. The spring show, the traffic was really steady. Some great brands, new faces, old friends. So I thought it was really positive. Lots of buzz around sustainability. So I think, the hard part for the attendees is to sort of sift through all of the different messaging that they're getting and really be able to focus on what they're looking for their brand and product specifically. So I'm hoping that I kind of helped a lot of brands with that during the show. But it is very overwhelming to some, but also exciting to see that there is so much focus around recycled and biomaterials. So I'm glad to see the industry moving that way.
So let's talk about kind of the economic state that we're in now, and kind of how does sustainability thrive under, this quote unquote recession that we might be going into, and kind of just inflation and where we're at now with the economy. Kind of talk about how that's affected kind of the materials that you guys work on and the sustainability in general.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I listen to the weekly FDRA call every week, and it's great to hear Gary's sort of footwear driven economic report. I find that to be very interesting. And, like you said, there's sort of some debate around, are we in a recession? Are we going towards a recession? But regardless, it's creating uncertainty in the industry. So I do think that sort of inhibits change, right? A lot of brands are sort of hesitant to say, like, let's make this huge change or huge overhaul, which is completely understandable. I do still see some brands though that are, they're staying the course. They're saying, you know what, if we focus on sustainability and just continue with our long-term goals, we're going to come out ahead. Because if you pause all of that, and just kind of wait it out, we're going to come out of it at some point. So I think the brands are doing the right thing that are just staying the course. And of course, this is my personal opinion, but just continue to work on those sustainability projects, continue to, keep your core company goals at the forefront. And then, once we're sort of out of this lull or whatever you want to call it, they're going to come out on top and they're going to be miles ahead of somebody who pushed pause on all of their projects. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic to talk to different brands and kind of see where their head's at.
Yeah, because I think they're still dealing with inventory and whether they're going to, lean in to make more, cut back, and it's a tough environment. From your perspective, because I know you guys work a lot on the development side of helping brands think about performance and the sustainability all intertwined in that. Are you seeing more people lean into development now than you have in the past, or are they cutting back on that as well? Because obviously, to your point, we're going to come out of this, and if you're not leaning into your development to make new product, you're not. I mean, the only way we get out of these inventory problems is new product coming in to, create like a more vibrant retail marketplace, right? So if we're not making new product that's a little bit different than before, it's just going to keep adding to the problem. So are you seeing more companies lean into that space, or are they just kind of pausing altogether at this point?
That's a good question, Andy. From our perspective and the brands we're currently working with, it's more of a delay. So we're still working on things. We're still sampling. We're still reformulating materials for people, things like that. But there's sort of, instead of maybe they were going to launch it fall 23, maybe it's spring 24 now. So I think we're just kind of seeing a slight delay of like a season or two. But they're not throwing away the project altogether, which is great.
Yeah. And to your point around we always talk about costs. And I think when we built the environmentally preferred material guide, which are on shoesustainability.com, where we were trying to align the industry to say, okay, these are basic thresholds, right? Like a little bit here, a little bit there is better than what we traditionally do. And in those areas, it doesn't cost that much more because those small little steps have been proven out over time. Are you seeing more companies start to kind of adopt that guide and start to look a little bit more at what they're doing step by step? I mean, the conversations we would have 3 years ago, you'd have deer in the headlights where a lot of brands are a little worried about being really far behind. And I feel like the conversations now are changing where they understand they can get better materials, better sustainable materials. And the cost isn't that much more. Obviously, if you're leaning in and trying to do 100% bio, that's going to be completely different. But
right.
Is that what you're seeing and talking to people about?
Yeah, and that's sort of our approach too. It's like, don't try to do it all at once necessarily, because again, that's quite overwhelming. But if you can focus on some of the smaller things, like let's just take an insole for example, just because that's a very simple piece of the shoe. It's like you can actually save money. So let's say you're a brand that sort of, you have like a flat 6 millimeter die cut insole. Maybe we change that into a molded insole with a little bit less material, but you actually end up getting a better fit. And, maybe it's a wash cost wise. Or maybe you have like a really robust, thick insole made out of virgin EVA. Maybe you switch that to a recycled EVA. That would be a cost savings right there. Or you could take 2 millimeters out of it and then you're saving materials, you're saving money. There's some kind of win-win-win situations if you get creative, versus just kind of continuing with and an insole is, it's often an afterthought, I would say, for a shoe developer. But it's like something that can make a decent impact, on the feel of your shoe, the comfort, the material that goes into it. Same thing you could apply to a midsole. So I think there are ways where you can actually be, more efficient. Even take packaging, for example. Like if you reduce your packaging, you could reduce the size of your product essentially when you're shipping it. So then you're saving on shipping. and then you're more efficient, you're saving money, and it's better for the environment, right? So I think if people kind of look at these different out of the box solutions, you could actually find some savings and additional sustainability benefits.
Yeah. Going back real quick, you spoke on customizing sustainable materials based on product type. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what we do, like our goal is to create the performance that the customer is looking for, and also adding in that recycled and bio element. So we really have kind of worked hard to offer several different formulations so that if you have a running shoe and you really can't sacrifice performance, we have something for you that has 50% recycled content. If recycled content is your priority, we have something that has 0% virgin EVA. All of the EVA is recycled. You're going to sacrifice a little bit on the performance. But again, you can kind of play with like thicknesses and molding to get to a comfort level that you're looking for, let's say, your lifestyle shoe. So it's really just sort of like moving those dials as far as what the brand needs and prioritizes. And of course, cost is always one of those dials too. But we've been pretty successful with that model, just being able to sort of dial in our brand's needs. So that's been a really cool thing that I've been a part of.
That's awesome. Because obviously you can do a lot with casual brunch shoes, right? Like they can be quite sustainable because the performance, you're not running in them, you're just walking, right? So it's just different product type. And I think 3 years ago that conversation would have been completely different than it is today, where we're talking about looking at those different levers to create a mix. It's almost like you're making you're in an audio studio and you're mixing the treble and the bass and like the feedback, the reverb, and you're moving it around to get the right kind of the kind of audio and the feel that you need and want. It's kind of where we're at now, right? I think that's a good analogy to
That's
use,
a great analogy, actually. That's sort of what I picture when I talk about the dials too. So yeah, we're very fortunate that technology has advanced, like you said, Annie, just recently to where we're able to do that.
Yeah. I feel like you at the next show should have like a mixing board, and like when somebody comes over, they can move the dials, and then on the screen it will adjust the type of bio or
I love it. I love it. I need an app developer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you could raffle off like Beats headsets or something like that, right?
I love it.
People would love it. Oh man, that's so good. Let me ask you, when you guys are working in the lab, because this is always a fascinating thing. People see, so consumers will just walk in the shoe, right? And they're like, look, feel, comfort, great. An engineer and designer is always interested in the back end, the lab work. So are your labs in Colorado, or are they actually towards the manufacturing in Korea and Vietnam? I always think it's interesting how long it takes to develop like new prototypes and materials, and how much hard work it goes into the chemistry and the engineering of things. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, those are great questions, because there is so much on the back end, and it does take us quite a while to get these materials to market, just because there is so much testing. So, we'll kind of give our factory chemical team sort of some goals, like, hey, we really want to hit 50% recycled, this compression set, this hardness. We'll just give them some goals, some targets. They'll come back with something. We will test it over here in-house. We'll do wear testing, measurements, all sorts of things. They will send that with a test report, of course, with what they've tested. But as you know, the wear testing is also very important. Durability, because, we want our products to be very durable, because that's part of sustainability as well. And we'll kind of go back and forth with that for a couple rounds until we get to something that we really like and we're ready to take to market and we think our customers will benefit from. So I would say overall development of a material, probably up to a year.
Wow.
If we're just dialing it a little bit, so now that we kind of have these like main core materials, if we're just dialing it a tiny bit, that could be as quick as a month.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we've spent a lot of time and effort into developing these materials, but I do think it's paid off just because of what we've ended up with.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's interesting because that's a lot of time, effort, and capital you're putting into something to test it, and you're not quite sure whether it's going to work out or not. But you always learn something, right? Like
Exactly.
you may not hit what you want, but it hits something else, and you're like, aha, like there's something there that we can use and pull around. So I guess it's just an encouragement to the industry. The hard work is definitely worth it because you can't fail if you have the right attitude to say, okay, like we didn't do what we wanted to do, but we got something different, and that's pretty good too,
Exactly.
right? So
Well, and I think too with
yeah,
sustainable materials in general, um, brands will really benefit by sort of opening up their tolerances a little bit. I think the industry for so long had such like a small tolerance, and it's a black and white pass fail. But if you really are putting your
right.
priorities into sustainability, maybe look at that
Mhm.
on a more, not as so much of a black and white level, but like a holistic level, and saying, you know what, we can sacrifice 2% here on our compression set to get to that 50% recycled, and like, is the consumer really going to feel that? Because a lot of it's just like,
Right.
oh, we're testing it in a lab. It's just a foam
Yeah.
sheet. We're just doing this and it's a yes or no.
Yeah. It's like legacy, it's just there because it was there
Exactly.
and no one knows why or who did it or whatever. So I think that's interesting. Let me ask you before we wrap up, like how do you guys look at and how are you looking at the broader marketplace about verification issues? Because I know part of that is greenwashing and concerns about, um, not confusing the consumer, but overall, like how do we hit those science-based targets without having someone look at it and measure it? And so, do you guys do third party validation? Do you do internal and just follow like GRS guides or some ISOs or something like that? How do you look at when you say there's recycled content in your foam? How do you make sure that it is recycled and it's from the source that you're telling your brands it
Yeah,
is
those
from?
are great questions. And I think that sort of circles all the way back to the beginning of our conversation of brands being able to sort of sort through all the greenwashing and all the sustainable products. So for us, because we have actual post-consumer recycled EVA, that's something that we really want to get that message out to our customers. So we've been doing the GRS for a couple years now, um, which has
Okay.
been, I think that's a great universal tool and certification. Does it cost money and take a lot of time? Yes, but I think it's worth it because it's an easy way for brands to be like, oh, this has been audited by a third party. We know it is exactly what they're saying it is. Because I do see some of that in the material world of you just really don't know. They're just telling you something, but do you know that it's accurate? So
Right.
the GRS has been awesome for us. We've done the Hague. We've had several sort of third party audits that brands have brought in on their own. So those are always great too. We have everything pretty buttoned up at this point as far as paperwork and traceability. And that's just been a huge goal of ours the last couple of years because of exactly what you said, the greenwashing. We certainly want to have all of our ducks in a row and be able to show our customers exactly where their recycled product is coming from.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't. I even think we're getting towards like double validity or double verification, right? I mean, you guys are branding now real recycled, and there's a reason why you have to do that because there's so much out there. But it's almost like you follow. So GRS is Global Recycled Standard by the Textile Exchange, just in case somebody didn't follow that. But it's a standard by which they go in and you measure throughout your supply chain, and it's basically chain of custody and verifying that what is recycled or bio, whatever your claim is, and you follow the letter of the law to make sure that you are basically certifying that chain of custody. And I think overall, I think it's getting to that point where we're judging ourselves, and we do need those third party people that are also, and there's a lot of them now, a lot of consultants out there, but like somebody who's also coming in behind us and like double checking because there is still a fear of like what we used to have in our supply chains, where in the factory, like, they'll give you one set of books and then you got to ask for the other set of books for, even like working hours and wages and things like that. So, but yeah, the real recycled caught my eye because I was like, oh, somebody's leaning into this now, because you're leaning into the fact that you spend a lot of time and money to verify that claim.
Right. Well, and I think the post-consumer thing is pretty unique too. And there's a ton of great products out there. I think it's great to recycle factory scrap as well. I just think it's good to designate so people do know what their story is and what they're bringing to the table as far as a brand goes for, consumer facing information, because as we're finding, the consumer actually does care. So
yeah. When you talk about post-consumer, where are you getting foam from anywhere around the world that's post-consumer, or is it just U.S.? Or, I mean, the collection of that has got to be quite difficult to get shoes back or grab them to put back into
production. So that's a whole nother story, right, about circularity. But this post-consumer EVA is actually if you look into it, it is in everything. It's in solar panels, which really, on a side note, drove up the cost of EVA last couple years. It is used to cover greenhouses. So actually that's where we get our EVA, is from greenhouse film. And the greenhouse film wears out because it sits in the sun, 365 days a year, basically. And so it wears down. Right. They strip the greenhouse film off of the greenhouses to replace it. And then typically they would just throw it away. But we've found a supplier that basically collects tons and tons of this stuff from all over South Korea and melts it down, and then we pelletize it and foam it. And so it's kind of cool. It's like it's almost like upcycling, repurpose. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but it's not actually from footwear. So that's kind of unique too.
I think that's the point is like, it's so hard to get the shoes back. You gotta grab what you can, keep whatever you can out of the landfill. So I think that's a great thing to look at. And I mean, one day, hopefully we'll be able to set up, circularity systems that actually work. But the infrastructure, I think, is just difficult. And also just the partnerships with consumers too. So kudos for you guys to find some innovative way to say, that's going to go in the landfill.
Yeah.
Nope, we can take that and benefit to the environment and to the brands too, who are also wanting to partner and do the same thing. So I think that's great. Katie, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate your time and sharing, because I think what I appreciate most about you is the honesty of you never overpromise, but you guys always deliver in terms of the recycling and the bio content, and really trying to help brands think through and hit their targets. But also I think it's good too, your point around like, why is your spec that, right? Like, think about that. It's like, it doesn't really have to be that. Can we work with this? Can we do that? How flexible can you be? And I think those conversations are really important.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, you guys. This is really fun. Always love listening to this show. So it's an honor to actually be on it finally. Yeah.
Yeah. We're glad to have you. And folks, as always, shoeandshow.com has our full catalog. Every single Monday is a new episode that drops. If you're interested in talking to more to Katie about foam, sustainable foam, what they're doing, how they can help you, you can reach out to me and I can put you in contact with her. But I think, again, I always say this, it's worth conversations, especially over a cup of coffee, about what you're doing and why, and helping someone look at that from a different vantage point and say, maybe you could try this, maybe you could try that. Because I think sometimes the deer in the headlights is because we're only looking in the mirror or only looking internally at our teams, and it really helps to have somebody from the outside supporting that. I think that's what a lot of our sustainability partners that help contribute to FDRA and support us, that's really what they do really well, is to be there to help and guide companies through these decisions. So I'll put that plug in. But as always, we appreciate you listening. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.